You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
In one brief moment, within the span of a heartbeat, your world could stop. There is no way to predict when you will become one of them. For the first time in cinema history, the greatest fear of all mankind will be graphically exposed.
I am an American, and I killed Americans. I am a human being, and I killed human beings. And I did it in my society.
Daniel 30 to 20.
Drop the gun. Drop the gun.
America the Beautiful has become America the Violent. This is the country that produces an attempted murder every 3 minutes. A murder victim every 20 minutes. 27,000 murders a year. And the number is growing. No one is safe.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of SLEAZOIDS, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on. Invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature, Grindhouse style, where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary SLEAZOIDs, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we're talking a major director from the 70s that we haven't talked about yet, actually. So join the sleaze.
Ooh, very mysterious tease. Okay. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover over there as well. And Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So there is like 210, coming up on 220 bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films all year long as well. So if you haven't made the jump yet, we recommend doing that. Patreon.com/SLEAZOIDS podcast. And speaking of which, we had a bunch of people make the jump this week. So let's give them their shout outs here. Oh my, let me go through this. Okay, we had Mitchell Camp, Dashiell Hanush, Treebone, Sandy Palacio, Smash, Groom. You guys are going to have to take it easier on me with the spelling. Kevin, Straparo, Ben Rogers, Evan, Patrick White, Ruben Sandwich, love it. John Lettingham, James Russell, Gas Station Bathroom, Joda Peters, Ned Daniels, Joshua, Theodore Suave, Logan, Jake, and last but not least, Sean Twist. So thanks so much to all of you folks. We appreciate that support and hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's the one plug of the week. As always, the other plug is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening to us on either one of those platforms, we can see the stats. We can see you right now listening on both those platforms. Give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you have yet to get your SLEAZOIDS dad cap or the beautiful blowout-themed poster art for the show designed by Brandon Lim of Black Belt Cinema, friend of the pod, what are you doing? That can get shipped to you fairly quickly here. Although, don't bug Brandon too much. He runs his own little independent shop. He'll get them to you. But that link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com for all those interested. But that is it for the intro. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over here on the main feed would have heard from us, where we would have had special guest Alex Wong of the Hello and Welcome Toronto Raptors podcast, NBA podcast, to discuss some 90s basketball movies with us. We talked about Ron Shelton's hustler rom-com, White Men Can't Jump, and we paired that with Spike Lee's biblical fathers and sons melodrama, He Got Game.
Yeah, I mean, Denzel is incredible, easy to say. And Wesley Snipes has some of the best fashion sense in White Man Can't Jump I've ever seen.
It made us all want to, on podcasts, rock the double colored tank top and do some pickup on Venice Beach for sure.
This summer.
So if you haven't heard that episode 2 weeks ago over on the main feed, go back and check it out. But then last week over on the Patreon, exclusively for the patrons, we decided that we wanted to talk about some classic ancient Egyptian movie monster, The Mummy. And we, there's a lot of people talking about a new Mummy in theaters right now. And we were like, it's time. Let's go back to the original pre-code Universal Monsters, more gothic romance take on the character from 1932 by Karl Freund, starring Boris Karloff, obviously, as the reanimated mummified high priest. And then we also paired it, though, with the sillier and more colorful 1957 Hammer Horror update by Terrence Fisher, which had, obviously, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee kind of reprising the roles and definitely has more monster movie isms to it.
Yeah, he's just getting shotgunned a bunch and just tearing through walls. It's pretty entertaining. But Karloff in the classic Mummy is awesome. He's just so like deeply hypnotizing. It's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot more expressionist mood going on in that one. So, but if you haven't heard that episode, that was, again, patreon.com/SLEAZOIDS podcast last week. Go back in, check it out if you're interested. But moving on to this week, we are joined by a very special first-time guest. He is a director, writer, and producer whose feature film resume I'm sure a lot of our listeners know because we've actually covered them on the bonus transmission series. They include Cam, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, and the recently released quasi-remake reboot of Faces of Death. That guest is Daniel Goldhaber. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I would just say Faces of Death is just another movie. Personally, that's kind of like how I like to think about it.
I think you earn that in terms of the uniqueness. There's not a whole lot connecting it other than some direct references that some the actual characters make. But beyond that, you have added your own narrative, your own set pieces. It operates very differently. It's very true.
Yeah. Yes, which I think this thing of like what is this thing outside of something that's capitalizing on an old school mondo horror fake snuff film collection. I think that's kind of also part of the funny irony of the movie itself.
Yeah, and also kind of just how these, like that film, the original Faces of Death, it has that reputation of being, was it real, was it not? And you incorporating some of that into the narrative of your film. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I think I speak for Jamie and I when we really admire what you did with your film. Blowout and Manhunter are all-time classics for us on this show. To see you kind of do like make the Barbie character this procedural detective going down a rabbit hole of scary snuff content moderation, coming face to face with a serial killer, doing the home invasion and voyeur slasher sequences. We got a lot out of it. But Daniel, we're so excited to have you on. I believe we actually met a number of years ago when you took How to Blow Up a Pipeline to TIFF, and I remember I came up to you at the CinemaScope party and was just like, man, congrats, it's such an awesome movie. We talked very briefly then about the possibility of chatting movies with us at some time, and all it took was for you to stoop to our sleazy level a little bit to
I was always a sleaze bag. I think I definitely I love sleazy movies, but this is just such a good opportunity. And it was, I don't know if it was intentionally timed to the release of the film, but when we started talking about this and you both were thinking about Faces of Death and Killing of America, I think that was also very exciting to me because there's not a lot of good opportunity to talk about Killing of America and kind of like the regular press tour of this movie. But because it's kind of it's not just a deep cut, it's also just like, it's so academic what its connections to Faces of Death are and how it even would have influenced the thinking about what we did, that, you're not going to get that on like the Collider interview.
Exactly. No, it's kind of like what we like to do, because not a lot of directors are game for it. We've had some times in the past where we're just like, I'd rather just do an interview. But some directors come up to us and they're like, man, I get to talk about other movies. I don't have to talk about my movie. That's kind of incredible. So we were stoked when you reached out, because we had already planned to basically do this episode, as you've mentioned here. We were going to talk about the original Faces of Death from 1978 by Alan Schwartz, and we're excited to get your in-depth thoughts and your personal experience with it. And when we were talking to you about a pairing, we were like, we already had Killing of America in mind, because I personally watched it during COVID, because that's just the mood I was in. I was like, this feels like the right time to experience this, while I was just having my own mission to watch all these movies I hadn't seen before. And when you mentioned that you also were a fan of it, I was like, okay, well, this seems like it was meant to be. And then I saw recently that you put a list together of movies that kind of inspired you a little bit when you were making the film, and I saw Killing of America sitting on there, and I was like, okay, this is perfect, especially because Killing of America, for anyone unfamiliar, Sheldon Rennan, 1981, it's sort of similar, except for it's kind of like the real thing that Faces of Death is pretending to be. It's literally made of all the archival snuff footage, including robberies and car chases, assassinations, war crimes, all this stuff. And it kind of just steps on the gas in a way that you will either find makes it more interesting or makes it more upsetting and more tasteless. And I'm excited to kind of get into the idea, or both, the idea of, we've actually not talked about much mondo documentary stuff just in general. So I'm excited to get into it here and, talk about these two films that formally and philosophically try to be ruminations on real life violence and death. And there's very few shows, I think, who want to put this into their eyeballs, and very few listeners. But they're all here with us today.
Yep.
Including
Welcome to the Freak Show.
including Daniel. So that being said, I think we're going to jump right into here. Let's kick things off. Let's talk about Faces of Death.
Une révolution.
If you have never thought about death, it's time you started thinking. Faces of Death. Now a major motion picture.
All right, we are talking Faces of Death, the infamous 1978 Mondo pseudo-documentary horror film written and directed by John Alan Schwartz. It doesn't have a typical cast list or plot description that I would normally give you in this part of the show, because notoriously it is essentially an assortment of both faked and a little bit it's sort of up in the air, real footage of people getting hurt or injured or dying in various ways, presented as a documentary on the many faces of death, which we are guided through by this fictional pathologist named Francis B. Gross, fantastic name, played by B-movie actor Michael Carr. Now,
have we talked about Michael Carr before?
I don't think so.
Okay, I was just curious if he was in some B-movie that we did.
No, yeah, we've never spoken about, because he did like these old westerns, I guess, in like the 50s and 60s. Okay. And if I ever watch one of those movies, I'm going to be freaked out by seeing him as just like a cowboy hat or something like that. But
the face of death himself.
Yeah, this isn't our first time talking about the subject at all, but I do think it's our first time dedicating an episode to sort of Mondo movie making, which was, for anyone unfamiliar, essentially a form of exploitation, documentary, and pseudo-documentary filmmaker, where often the filmmakers were tastelessly photographing shocking real-world subjects, whether it was animal cruelty or indigenous rituals or porn or surgeries or all, you name it, they would offer it up to you, and they would sell it to you as basically an exotic or a taboo experience. You could go into the theater, you could experience something happening on the other side of the world that maybe was illegal where you lived. And we've talked about exploitation filmmakers including documentary and stock footage into their films in the 50s and 60s a lot. This was sort of born from that. Mondo Cane from 1962 is kind of the big one where this subgenre gets its name from. But Faces of Death is arguably the biggest title to come out of it and spawned an entire franchise, because it had both some snuff, we'll get into this, and artificial snuff footage that basically made it this just amazing object in the underground bootleg videotape scene, where it was like, have you heard of this? This is banned. It's so fucked up. It's in all these, it's so gross. Who's going to show it to you? And that's kind of the reputation that resulted in it having, I didn't even see how many sequels it had, 5 or 6 or something like that.
I think there are there's actually only 4 proper sequels, and then 5 and 6 are just like re-edits of 1 through 4 in various ways, and they kind of like it quickly kind of devoured itself. And you know, it's funny,
that's classic producer mindset, just reuse footage and make another one.
exactly And because like at a certain point, like it doesn't actually matter like what's in it, you know, it's there's a brand, people don't even want to watch it half the time, you know. And I think that's one of the funny things about Faces of Death, is that I think its success in some way has to do with like just the branding around it. Like even the like banned in 48 countries thing like wasn't actually real or accurate, you know. It's you know, in comparison to something like Killing of America, there's like precious little actual death footage in it. And then most of the death footage that is in it is like so ridiculous and over the top and kind of fantastical that like it's actually hard to take seriously, even though like everybody does kind of take it seriously or did at the time. What I think is like really interesting about the movie is like when I was working on this Faces of Death film, like I just got to talk to a lot of people about Faces of Death, and you know, you're in a taxi cab and someone's like, what are you doing in New Orleans? And I'm like, I'm scouting for a movie I'm making. Oh, what's the movie? Oh, it's called Face of Death. Oh, is it about that Face of Death? I remember that so well. You got the monkey and the, and the beheading and like the guy on fire and like
how does everybody know this movie?
Crazy. But it's like, it's because it's like, not only is it kind of like the JFK assassination, in which everybody that had like an experience with Face of Death, like remembers like where they were, who they were with, what they were wearing, what they had for breakfast that morning. But also like they have this like, I think there's a few movies that have like such extensive recall with like people who saw it like 40 years prior and then can kind of like name the scenes of the film in chronological order. And I find it very interesting because like there is something undeniably indelible about it.
Yeah, and it is strange the way people talk about it. It's more based on kind of the reputation of its shock rather than the actual appreciation for any, like the filmmaking or even some of the actual sequences themselves. Oftentimes it feels like it's just an experience people have thrust upon them by somebody. Like another thing that you probably remember is like who showed you this film. Now for me, I didn't grow up. I heard about it. But this is the first time I ever saw it. I think I've seen clips of it here and there, just maybe on the internet. But this, I have to say, watching it, 40 years later, it does seem just very dated. And it's kind of become more of this kind of item you just watch as a cinephile and just kind of go like, okay, I saw Faces of Death. It had its moment in the
a very
the
specific
culture.
Type of cinephile.
Yeah, true. Yes, the sleazoids here. But
but I agree. I think it is more of like, at this point you watch it now, it feels like more of a historical artifact of like a video store era that doesn't exist anymore, and it's it's less interesting as like the taboo breaking thing it tried to be at the time, because at the time obviously a lot of people even were pretty upset by it just because it didn't really feel like, even if it was all real, it didn't feel like a sincere artistic exploration of that. It felt very exploitative, and then that just became even more apparent when people started to find out exactly how much of it was faked and exaggerated and shot to blend in with the real stuff, which for a lot of people is obviously a relief, because it means that a lot of the animal harm in the film that you're witnessing is not real. I know that they talk about like the moment with the dogs like fighting each other, for example, is one that is like famously said they just like put fake blood on them and they were like mating or something like that, and that was basically it. But at the same time, that being true and finding that out, it dispels that magic of, I'm gonna go rent the forbidden tape from the back room that has real death in it, and it becomes I think a little bit more it feels more hucksterish at that point. You feel like you're experiencing a guy who was just like a William Castle type figure who was like, oh, did I really do that? I don't know.
I think that's the thing, is that part of, I think, what gives Faces of Death its power is like, you watch it and you're kind of like, no one would make this. Like it doesn't. And it's funny because I interviewed the guy that directed it, and there's actually some, based on what I was told by this random person I got on the phone with, like who knows, but basically he told me he was working as a nature documentarian, like making like documentaries for ABC, was approached by this like Japanese business conglomerate that was like, Mondo movies are doing well, what if we did Mondo Death? And he's like, that's a great idea, that sounds fun, that sounds like it'll make money. I don't want my name on it or anywhere near it, because that's not what I want. And so he kind of, the guy, I forget his name, who's credited as the director,
he uses like 3 or 4 different names, so you'd have to. I was trying to remember, because his actual name is John Allen Schwartz.
Yes, and so John Allen Schwartz was actually the screenwriter of the thing, who then kind of ended up stepping in and taking like the public-facing credit. But as the guy I talked to, as the director kind of described it to me, he thought this was a good business venture, but also like it was such a departure from like his like annoying day job of making like ABC documentaries, that he just was like, I'm going to have fun with this. So like, he's like, yeah, I'll put some jaunty music in a section where like it's really gruesome and fucked up. He's like, we'll dream up the like craziest death scenario. Like it was just kind of like a camp fun like exercise that they didn't take, I think, on some level terribly seriously. And I think that's what makes it feel so cursed. Because like you actually watch the movie, it's not like the stuff that's there isn't that gruesome. It's this sense of like, why would anybody make this movie? Whereas you contrast that to something like Killing of America, and you're like, okay, this movie has a very clear point of view and it's saying something, and like so many of these choices are made like with like great decision and thought put into them, and you can kind of feel that weight.
Killing of America has a craftsmanship behind it where you're like, someone is you know, driving this. You watch this and it feels like an assortment of just things hitting you, and they kind of loosely string them together with the creative consultant and the narrator, the pathologist Francis B. Gross, who, you know, it's very, very loose, where he's just like, after years of performing autopsies on corpses, I've become fascinated with death and all the shapes and sizes and faces, and now let's go around the world and look at this accumulation of footage that I'm gonna like put in front of you, Clockwork Orange style, and just experience, you know, this, have a greater understanding of the world and reality by watching this thing. And you're like, this isn't really thought through, you know?
Yeah, it feels a little bit just kind of mushed together. There is an actual flow to Killing of America, whereas this does start to feel like it's just kind of a compilation of these ideas that he thought of with death. And especially when it comes to the reenactments, having like with Killing of America, making it all archival documentary footage, there feels like a very clear statement there. And with this, mixing all of like with some archival footage for sure, but then there's a ton of these fake reenactments that are doing like classic horror movie filmmaking techniques to hide certain gory moments and stuff that, especially when you look at it now, you're like, well, I know that this is fake. This is like, you know, it's when you watch, for instance, if either of you guys have watched the that Area 51 alien autopsy, and it just feels so like, it feels like a film, right? It feels cinematic rather than what an actual archival footage of death would feel like or look like.
There's actually a charm to some of the artificial stuff sometimes in this, I think, when it gets like so like that. Do you guys have a favorite one, just out of curiosity?
Oh, 100%. I mean, for me, like in Faces of Death, it's like, I mean, I think the monkey scene is really, that's the standout, because, what I think is remarkable, and I don't know if you have the ability to pull the movie up on your computer and observe what I'm about to tell you, because it's such a crazy fact, which is that this monkey brain that traumatized like a generation is a piece of cauliflower with red food dye on it. And if you pause it, it's like, it's not even like it kind of looks like a brain. It's like if you pause it and look at it, it just kind of looks like a piece of cauliflower. Like there's no part of it that looks even like remotely like a brain, but there's just something about like this like weird lo-fi aesthetic that they're working with, where you just kind of like, even though I kind of recognized how goofy this was, I like it's like I bought that as like some sort of amazing fake brain, you know, special makeup effects thing. Like
there's something about the actors like also just being like, oh, give me some, you know, and like getting real into eating it and stuff that like really puts you off. But I totally agree about the lo-fi nature of it too, because I know that Vinegar Syndrome announced they're going to be doing a 4K of it soon, and I was wondering what you could even extract in the first place. But I was like, there's something this movie benefits probably from the fact that you're watching it on a VHS and you're like, yeah, you can't 100%. Tell that that's cauliflower.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have, if not a 4K, I have a very high quality rip of it. It was at least like, I mean, because we used the highest quality version. I don't know if it was a full 4K remaster, but I believe it was a 4K scan in the movie, right? Because we had to put, there's a lot of faces that's mixed directly into the film. We go full screen faces a few times. And I think it's still so like, it's such high contrast, like low light photography during like most of the reenactment stuff. You don't really notice it. It like still feels real. Like or rather it just, it's so lo-fi. You just like kind of don't, it's not like the upgrade makes it less believable, weirdly enough, is what I'm trying to say.
It's also, I feel like the monkey scene, just based on, you know, talking again about some of the horror filmmaking techniques that they use to still make you feel like it's a visceral experience. Like when they have those small 1 second shots of them actually hitting the head of the monkey with the mallets, which I would assume is, I don't know, like a plastic.
You
or
don't
something
even see
like,
the monkey. You barely even see the monkey head get hit.
Yeah,
like
it
most
cuts away a lot.
Most of it's like, or it's just like the mallet going down in front of the monkey head. It doesn't like, you don't actually see impact really.
Yeah.
There's like one quick shot of the monkey getting hit, I think.
But I will say, for some reason, I found that one, maybe it's because it actually does have the monkey reacting as if it's scared and it's turning around the table and everything, that gives you still that kind of gross feeling. Because there's other ones where they use animals like the alligator or the bear, which I was just laughing
the alligator
at.
Just yanking the dude into the water and then being like, that's just the circle of life, man. The death of one creature ensures the existence of another, I think is the quote.
Yeah, and behind the bush as well, again, like masking the actual violence that's taking place. And then when they go to the footage of people supposedly capturing that footage of him like spinning around with the alligator, it's very quick, and there's like a lot of fast cuts, and there's blood, but it's like, the water fills with blood and then they cut away. It's more gags than anything. And the bear one,
what's the Louis Teague alligator movie where it's like Robert Forster's trying to stop it and it's eating people around the city?
Is it just called Gator or Alligator?
I can't, but it might just be called Alligator.
It's just called Alligator, yeah.
That one was where I was going, man, if only John Allen Schwartz had the budget to show a full alligator going around town just eating people,
Yeah. But then there's ones where it's like the bear, where it's honestly kind of comedic because they're going up to a grizzly bear, and then they roll down the window and one guy gets out with the camera and he's going right next to the bear. Then it cuts to him getting like, the bear goes up on its legs and screams and growls, and then it cuts to him eating the guy. Like, it's all these, they're really comedic, to be honest, just maybe looking back on them now,
I also think it was something that like Issa kind of stressed me because neither of us had even heard of Faces of Death when we were approached to make this movie. We basically, like, our agent was like, "Hey, Legendary is doing a Faces of Death movie. Are you interested?" We didn't know what it was. We went and watched it. Issa watched it first and called me and was like, I don't know what this is. She's like, I think I recognize bits and pieces of it from the internet. She's like, it's not great. There's no story. But I also really remember her finding it like kind of hard to square this like Holocaust footage that's at like the end of the movie with like these like very cheesy reenactments inside of it. And I think that like this is just one more thing that makes it feel like so cursed, is like this thing of like, then sometimes they put like really like too dark of stuff in. And as you're kind of looking for some sort of like rhetorical coherence here, it ends up just being like, what was that? Like, and again, it's like, what's the thought process behind this? It's like, I almost don't want to know. It feels too weird.
Yeah, because I think he expressed that he wanted to essentially do almost like the same thesis as Killing of America, but then when you incorporate all of these fake reenactments and these like over the top things like cannibalistic orgies and stuff, it's just it lacks consistency. So then when you have that and then you cut to the Holocaust, it's just so jarring and like incredibly distasteful. And it's like and it's the small snippets that you get too just work as like pure propaganda rather than any nuance. And it just it feels really strangely like far dirtier than what we'll be talking about with Killing of America, even though all of that is real footage just kind of annihilating your brain over and over again. But it's the way they go about using this footage, and
we'll talk about the distinction when we get to Killing of America as well. But I actually find that film more upsetting with like an effect and like with a drive and a purpose to it. And this one, because of what we've just described, I end up finding this one like kind of exhausting. I end up being like, oh, we're on to the next thing. There's very little rhyme or reason to structure it. And it'll get silly, it'll get serious, and it doesn't do it with a sense of, as we've already highlighted, sort of like a sense of craftsmanship to it, which sucks because there's then moments that hit and I'm like, oh, that's I kind of am interested in that. Like when they do the recreation of the guy, the other one I wanted to highlight was the electric chair.
Totally.
With the guy who gets the death penalty. And obviously it's doing it with the purpose of, it's not quite Truman Capote or anything, but it's trying to do it with the purpose of like, isn't this bad? Does this solve anything? Like, this is not like, isn't this gruesome and horrible? And why would we do this to another human being? And then when they emphasize that point by focusing on the guy shaking and gurgling and his eyeballs bleeding behind the thing. And, and it was like, you could feel fear emanating from his body is the quote that they say during that scene. And it's fairly vividly recreated enough that with a purpose that I go, that's, sort of interesting. And then you'll just get straight to, as you were talking about, the one I couldn't take seriously at all was the cult ritual sacrifice footage of like, it looks like sub Last House on a dead end street.
Yes. Was that the Ed Wood movie that we watched? Or whatever?
No. That was the one that Kai brought on like many, many years ago. But like, it basically looks like a complete underground filmmaking thing where they're like, followed by the Southern Snake cult of, people who look like the snake version of like the Shakers doing like dancing and stuff like that. And I don't know. I just going from one to the other so quickly with so little rhyme or reason or purpose is, I think, what ends up kind of hurting your experience of watching this movie, especially because it's an hour and 45 minutes long.
Yeah. It does really feel that you feel that length a bit. And was there not an Ed Wood like unfinished movie that we did? Was it Ed Wood that had like the unfinished orgy that Will Sloan brought on?
yeah,
it
that's
reminded me of
Will
that
Sloan.
a little bit, like just because you're in this one room and it's like it's really bad acting, there's not the best sound going on, but they're still trying to do all of these horror gags along with it. And
I'm gonna look this up so I can remember The Only House in Town, if anyone is wondering the movie that Jamie is referencing. Literally 55 minutes of just an unfinished like horror porn that Ed Wood shot. And yes, there are moments in this film that absolutely make you recall that a little bit.
There's another thing that I noted where for some reason, and I don't, this is where I got confused on whether or not he's trying to be a little tongue-in-cheek, where some of the music that he puts over top of the stuff is really silly. Like really,
the music was goofy and kind of funny to him on purpose. That's one thing I very much remember him telling us. Yeah, and it's what I think is interesting is, and this, there is one genuine new dead body in Faces of Death. I don't know if you guys know this, which is when there's like this body that washes up on a beach, which is
the guy who drowns, right?
But it weirdly feels like one of the worst like moments in the movie. Like
it feels like one of the fakest ones. Absolutely.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, why are you even showing this to me? Like, this is getting zero reaction from me. But that's actually the real body in the movie.
Do you think that he would argue that he somehow tricked you then? That his
maybe we're all wrong.
No, it was always described to me as like, oh, it was sick that happened and we got a real new dead body in the movie.
Oh yeah,
it was almost like a point of pride.
Yeah, see that does seem. I think I read it. I think it was on the wiki where it said something like they were almost done that shooting day as well, and then they found the body because people were making a commotion on the beach. And it's just like, that does feel like, oh, we didn't get, I think they were only capturing pollution that day. That's what it was. And then they're like, oh, great, we got a body. It feels almost like a
they were shooting the natural disaster and like component of the film, because they switched so many different times. We're like, we're going to go to war, and then we're going to go to serial killers, and then we're going to go to medicine and disease and rats and cancer and all this kind of stuff, right?
It reminds me of like Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler in certain moments. It's like you're looking for the death so that you can put it in your movie, and but
that's quite literally. Oh, this is a good thing that I haven't gotten a chance to talk about yet. One of the other things that the director of Faces of Death told me, I can't believe I haven't said this. I'm just recalling this because this conversation happened 5 years ago. This is an
exclusive. I love it. Let's go.
Yeah. He told me that one time, after the movie came out and had done its thing, and he was still doing stuff at ABC, and he went in to do some documentaries for the news section of ABC, and people knew that he'd worked on Faces of Death or that he'd done it, right? But his name wasn't on it, so it wasn't a liability. He said the head of ABC News pulled him over and basically said, I kind of hate you. And he was like, why? And he's like, because now this is all we're doing. Is if it bleeds, it leads stuff. And essentially and I do think it's important to kind of put Faces into like a different kind of political context. What I think is not talked about with the movie nearly enough is what year it came out. 1978. That we're talking about a movie that went into production shortly after the end of Vietnam, shortly after, like, that was the first real televised war. That's the first time that we kind of broke this barrier of watching kind of murder and you know,
people
real
saw these
war
images on TV,
on television.
Yep.
As entertainment, you know, back to back with advertisement. And I think that there's this really critical thing about mondo horror, which is that it's actually on some level like picking up the slack after Vietnam ends, and people have like gotten a taste for something, and people have also realized that like it's selling shit. People are tuning in. There's money to be made here. And the Faces of Death on that level was like, again, it started from a purely economic standpoint of like, there's money in these images of death. How do we capitalize on it? And I think it's interesting because, like, again, I think Faces of Death is kind of, it's such a fascinating cultural object. It's such an effective mirror of the times, not in just which it was created, but in which it is existing, in that, you know, it starts on film as this response to Vietnam, then it like blows up on VHS tape, like, you know, in this moment where kind of like the production and distribution of the physical media format becomes totally democratized. That's one of the things that becomes democratized. Then we get to the internet. And by the time that East and I encounter it for the first time, we're encountering it on YouTube or you know, eBombs World or Rotten.com or whatever. And now the kinds of images that Faces of Death was capitalizing on have become the domain of like the biggest corporations on the face of the planet. And I think that there is like a critical linkage there when you're talking about Nightcrawler that is very valid, which is like, you know, the whole notion of if it bleeds, it leads was on some level pioneered in the commercial space by not just Faces of Death, but it was certainly a part of the moment.
Yeah, the entire mondo subgenre, that it feels like it's driven by that exact mentality for sure. Faces of Death just got to be a little bit ahead because it got to be, we're showing you all of this, you know, war footage some of which you've probably seen before, and then we're throwing in, you know, our little stinker elements that we get to throw in as well to make it even just to push it a little bit further. Was there anything else I was curious that was like notably real? Because I couldn't remember. The one part that's sort of sketchy about this movie is that, and a little self-defeating about it, is that you could argue that it blends it so it all feels a little fake.
Yeah, it's strange that way.
So there's other moments for me, but like the parachute malfunction one was one where I couldn't see the seams on it as much, and I was a little bit like, that guy looks like he just like broke his legs or his back or whatever.
I think the parachuter was one of the few that was like licensed from
okay.
I believe so. That the parachuter was licensed footage, but not original.
I don't know why that
footage.
one just gave me like a visceral. Maybe it was because I could imagine doing it, and I was like, that one gave me like a little bit of like fuck that sucks, dude.
I also think, again, it's the difference between how that is shot and how the other ones are shot. Whereas this one is
that's it too.
You know, you're back just hundreds of feet, and you can just see this small figure, you know, struggling and then hitting the ground. It feels as if it's not sensationalized and super cinematic, so it makes it, I think, automatically more.
I feel that way
believable.
about the footage of the crash too, when they go and they're like scooping up pieces of people or whatever. Like that I think is real, that I read. And the other thing, which is strange too, though, what he does is, I think it was the train derailment. That one, the derailment is real. That footage is real, but apparently the aftermath footage isn't. So he's making like fake footage mixed with the real footage. And I don't think he does that a ton, but that's one moment where he does it. And that's that just feels gross. And it's fascinating in a way, just where his mindset would be there. But it's like the, you know, the actual carnage wasn't available, so now he has to still present it to you. So he's going to make it up himself. It just feels so weird. It's such a strange mindset, I guess. Yeah, it's kind of part of the contradiction of the movie for me, is that it is, as people accuse it of being, a little too exploitative to be the kind of ostensibly educational or philosophical work that they kind of tried to sort of structure it into. And by what Daniel has described to us, that was not the actual intent when they were making it. They just used that as like a loose shape in order to get it. And yet at times you watch it and it's just a little too phony and artificial enough for the shock tactics to like fully hit you, I think.
Maybe that's part of what its impact is, though, is that if it wasn't purporting to be educational, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is just fucked up, right?
True.
But it's the fact, like, it does tap into this like late 70s like educational video vibe that I think it lends it almost a sense of authority. That you're like, yeah, okay, like it's it's Thursday afternoon in the schoolroom, like time to watch a little educational
Mr. Ross is
film.
throwing it on.
Exactly, you know what I mean? It's like Faces of Death. Yeah, no, it happened in California. What? It happened in California. There was a huge court case about
it. Some guy did it in a math class. His name was Bart Shores, I believe.
Sorry, it was math?
Yeah, mathematics teacher.
And the director of the movie was like, that was the greatest gift they ever could have given us. That's part of what turned the movie into such a phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
It's like this teacher puts it on, all of a sudden, there's like a moral panic about it. And there's nothing better.
And that's that was 7 years later too, which is another thing where these things, like when they're made, it seems often that it's not really totally hitting the culture the way it does until like 10 years after, just because of some controversy that develops because of the film itself or something along those lines. It's interesting. I can't believe when I read The Math Teacher, I laughed so hard. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Was there any scenes, Jamie, that we didn't hit that you want to hit before we angle to wrap it up? Because I know that this is a classic one where normally I have like a plot to go through. I'm like, I do not have one here. I have like a couple of just like scenes and moments, and I think the paranormal seance stuff is so goofy.
Oh yeah,
where they try to
audio where she's like reverbing and distorting her voice, and at that point I was like, well, that's clearly fake. Like you're not even trying to make like a scene that's believable. At this
the Ed
point,
and Lorraine
like
Warren stuff where they're like, they're setting up like paranormal activity equipment to get like this whole situation, and that stuff like immediately follows like the section on like suicides and accidents and that kind of stuff, and like the woman jumping from the building, which again is another moment that feels really horrible. Or obviously Go ahead.
It's something interesting here that I think I'm kind of thinking about, which is I think. It's not unreasonable to call this the first viral video or one of the first viral videos in a way that started on videotape. But I'm thinking so much about this like real or fake debate that we're having, like where even today, even like, 40 years later, we're sitting here like picking apart like these weird goofy decisions and how bad it is while it's still kind of having this weird authentic feeling. And what I'm realizing is it's kind of the same way that like we pick apart rage bait, where it's like, you'll see some piece of content posted online. I'll be like, this is humiliating for this person. Like, why are they doing it to themselves? Like somebody like Nico Avocado, right? Where there's actually there's like a very similar question with him. Like, is this real? Is this performance art? Like, how bad is it? And then he does like the weight drop thing. And like, that just makes the whole thing feel even more like both.
Yes.
Like it's so hard to kind of wrap your head around. And if it wasn't so like bizarre and campy, and if it wasn't in so many ways, if you couldn't like always be kind of witnessing the cracks in the thing, you wouldn't have anything to like dig your fingernails into and kind of like start getting underneath of. But I think it's actually because there are so many cracks, but it's presented so earnestly that like it triggers that thing where you're like, I have to talk about this. I have to show it to somebody because it's kind of like, it's just like, it's the impossibility with which I can like not understand why somebody did this to themselves is like infuriating me, and I have to share it. And I think it's interesting that even going back to the VHS era, there's some level of rage bait that's like inherent to the success of Faces.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and you know, your movie gets at this a lot too, and I think Jamie and I both are feeling this as we're pivoting towards reductive rating round on Face of Death, which for you, Daniel, is where we remove the words and the nuance, and we try to give the movie a number between some sort of defined number between 1 and 5. But obviously, you're a filmmaker and you don't do Letterboxd ratings, so if you don't want to partake,
no pressure.
You don't have to. But
I have a reductive rating for Faces of Death. 100%.
Please.
I could give it one.
Jump in and give it to us.
I think it's like a super solid 2.5 bagger. Like and my
that's probably where I would be too.
my rationale is like if I were to take it like as it exists as a film, and I'm like I sit down, no cultural concept, and I watch this, I'm like this ain't cutting it. But I think that. You know, I think the 2.5-star rating is often like, that's just like a movie that's kind of like, regardless of any other problems it has, it's so interesting. Like if you can talk about a movie for 45 minutes, that's at like a floor of 2.5 stars, you know?
That's probably true on our show, actually. We don't give out the ones too often. We don't want to talk about things that we dislike too often. But no, I am with you. I find it fascinating as a cultural object. I really enjoy actually talking about it. I did actually have fun even just experiencing it, even though I was sitting here and going through the flaws of it. And actually what I was sort of leaning towards was I think Jamie and I had a similar response, and it is a response I think that is partially the subject of your movie, which is that we live in a time where I'm like, oh, this is so quaint. This is so like I open up my phone to talk with my friends in my phone, and I happen to scroll by something that's worse than anything that appears in this movie
I go on
by
Facebook
accident.
and see crazier shit,
all the time, you know. And so it's one of those things where, you know, and I found that a really interesting component of your movie that you directly address that, like how would, you know, people take this, and, you know, there's moments where people are like, yeah, that's just completely fake. That's bullshit. People at one point call it a student film. And I'm like, I kind of have similar critiques, but there is something, cursed and evil about this movie in a way where even through the artificiality and the phoniness and the self-defeating aspect of it, I don't know, I find something intriguing about it, and definitely unpleasant and distasteful enough that I kind of go, I want to respect it. But by the very end of it, I do feel a little bit like I had a little bit of a dull experience, a little bit exhausted by it, and I throw on Killing of America, and I feel something a little bit more intentionally awful and upsetting and kind of amoral in a way I'm excited to get into. But yeah, for this, it lands in sort of a similar territory. High 2 for me. For you, Jamie?
Yeah. I think the same thing for very similar reasons. There's a couple parts that I didn't mention that I'll just throw here. I thought the guy that freezes himself so that he can be resurrected in the future was interesting. And I do believe that was real. And the family eventually, I read, stopped paying for the process. So eventually they just unthawed him and buried him. And it was like, that's damn, that did not work out for that guy at all. But like it would have. But it's just it's a wild thought to think they only had him for like 3 months. And then they're like, we're not doing this anymore. But just a really morbid fact from the film. The ending with the baby and the mother is really funny, given that everything that we see
the uplifting piano music and the shots of nature.
Yeah, dude, it turns into like a Hallmark film for 5 minutes. It's kind of hilarious, to be honest. I laugh pretty hard. Again, it's hard to tell if that's intentional, but
funny enough, that's actually something we'll talk about in the next film too. He had to throw in his little moment of trying to make people leave the theater on like less of a sour note, if you can. It's like, okay,
the ending
he undermines it still. We'll talk about that.
It's great stuff. But yeah, even watching this, like, you know, obviously it doesn't really work anymore, I don't think, but it felt strangely exciting to still finally watch Faces of Death, just given its reputation. And most of it, you know, I found to be fairly silly, but there were a couple moments where I think it did that kind of gut punch visceral effect that they wanted from you when it comes to the more modern for its time reenactment stuff. Like the dog one, I was relieved to find out that wasn't real, just because of the cutting and everything. It felt like they actually could have gotten a couple pit bulls to hurt each other. So that was nice to know. But it's, you know, overall, I think it is, like you said, quaint, and even for its time in certain moments. So when it comes to like the horror film filmmaking techniques. So yeah, strong 2, I guess.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for Faces of Death. We're going to be right back, though, and we're going to be talking about a counterpart that came out 3 years later using nothing but actual archival footage, and it's gonna get real fucked up in a moment here. So stick around. We're talking about Killing of America.
With a severed head in my hand, talking to it.
Every scream, every cry for help, every image of madness is real. No matter how paralyzing the shock.
You're the mother.
Know the truth and survive the killing of America.
It's okay. Nobody's getting hurt. Just come on in.
Well,
Hey, come on in.
you better come on in.
Come in, please.
Come on in. It's too late now.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Killing of America, the 1981 Mondo documentary, political archival footage essay film, arguably, directed by Sheldon Renan, written by Leonard Schrader and Chico Schrader, and not starring any actors, as it is a legitimate documentary made up entirely of archival material, featuring narration by Chuck Riley, though. Yeah, is it?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's true.
That's right.
True facts. Already getting started here, but yes, and also the trailer voiceover guy. Sorry, I wanted to highlight Chuck Riley. He does a great job on this film. So, as the film goes, it is just documenting the apocalyptic rise of violence in the United States. The alternate title of this film was literally Violence USA, and definitely hits what we were talking about in the intro here of a rumination of sort of real life violence and death. And this one, I think, takes it as more of an actual academic approach, thinks through some of the ways we see violence, we process it, we ingest it, and kind of how it lingers in the collective consciousness through imagery here. And I think it has a better artistic, I don't know if I want to say merit, artistic through line or agenda that it is trying to reach, whether you agree with it.
Fair. I think merit is fair. I think when you're making work that's talking about like violence and death and trafficking and like the footage of violence and death, I think it's very fair to, I think, kind of try to hold the movie itself to some sort of standard of like, what is like, why is it like, why are you trafficking in these images? Why are you showing them? Why are you like purporting that they're real or not real? And I think that that's what's so interesting is Killing of America only exists because of Faces of Death. And yet it's being used to actually try to like make an argument about something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was made for the same Japanese video market as well. Like literally, like it follows. They were like, Faces of Death made us some money. This could also make us some money.
Yep. Exactly.
And I do find too, like even though it's I think a lot more intelligent with the way that it uses its footage and it kind of it narrates and directs the film, it really doesn't try at all to be soft about it dishing out the death toll and making you still feel that really visceral feeling, and it does feel like there is a lot of fear propaganda being pumped into you while you're watching this, and it works. I think that's the real difference too, is that whether or not some of the things said in this movie are completely accurate, it makes you kind of believe in this like just America being a total wasteland of violence and death and whatever else, and it's incredibly effective in that particular way as well.
Yeah, I mean, comparing them back to back, it essentially fully commits to being the unflinchingly gross object that Faces of Death kind of pretends to be, or sort of haphazardly or sort of halfway gets to being. And I find this incredibly, like, legitimately upsetting and interesting to think about on an experimental level, like just in terms of form and in terms of ugly philosophy. Like it's really something to watch. And part of that is Sheldon Renan, who primarily before making this was actually a film critic and a writer and a thinker, primarily known for his 1967 book, An Introduction to the American Underground Film, which was all about experimental filmmakers at the time, like Stan Brakhage, Andy Warhol, Kenneth Anger. So this was like a guy who was like a legitimately someone who really thought about film form and editing and technique and what you were saying with it. And it's noticeably made by someone who's doing that. And meanwhile, on the other side of this, it is written by the husband and wife writing duo of Leonard and Chico Schrader. Leonard obviously being the brother of Paul Schrader, and that also Chico being his Japanese wife he married while teaching English literature in Japan, who helped him also co-write Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters for Schrader. So, and we've talked about him and her before, because the Yakuza was like partially based on some of the experiences that he saw over there. And Leonard Schrader also wrote that insane movie, The Man Who Stole the Sun, from 1979, which is like an incredible movie, Japanese movie. So this is partially why he was in the Japanese film industry at the time. And I think that's just such an interesting combination of people, like a guy, the brother of Paul Schrader, who was trying to write exploitation movies like the Yakuza with his brother in order to just become a filmmaker, become a screenwriter. He writes this for an actual American experimental filmmaker. And the two of them are basically like, well, we've sold the Japanese market on, we need to show a bunch of death footage and it needs to be about America because, I don't know, I guess that feels like exotic to that market. So there you go. Throw it all in there. But it's just like there's actual people who are, I don't know, I don't want to make it sound too mean to the Faces of Death crew, but like people who are really thinking through the formal decisions they're making while assembling this thing. And that's even the ones that are made for commercial purposes, like hiring the composers who did the synth soundtrack for Shogun Assassin. That's trendy. Just throw them in there. Also getting Lee Piercy to edit the film, who was the editor for Shogun Assassin and eventually became Stuart Gordon and Catherine Bigelow's editor. This guy cut Blue Steel and like Reanimator. Like it's such an interesting just amalgamation of like people who throughout the 80s would actually become some pretty serious filmmakers, and then to just make something so disturbing that's an educational doc, but so grim and moody and upsetting and amoral that you're just it's a much more sobering experience to watch this film, I think.
Yeah, and there's because of so much of the city footage that's used in particular with the violence, and in the connection for Schrader, it definitely reminded me of Taxi Driver in that sense of like when Bickle is like, in that mindset of everything is societal scum and needs to be getting rid of, and it just reminds you of that kind of underlying violence that the country has.
The world through Travis Bickle's eyes is a funny way to pitch the movie, but you're not wrong.
It's one thing I felt watching it too, and I've been dicking around here trying to figure out if it was the same Japanese consortium that financed both movies, because I know that Faces of Death came from a Japanese backer, but then I started realizing this one did too, and trying to see if there was a connection there, but I haven't been able to dig one up. But I think that one of the other things about Killing of America that I find super interesting watching it, with what you're saying about like this is how Travis Bickle rules the world, like sees the world, is like there's a way where he's like there's a cop getting murdered every minute, and like the movie also feels like a Donald Trump campaign advertisement. Like it's weird because like I think that the movie makes enough of the argument that kind of like murder has just essentially become normalized in the United States, like as a kind of path to like profit. Like it kind of makes that point, though, a little bit obliquely, but you're also kind of left with this sense of like, the cops got to go clean up them streets, like there's not an idea that like, that there's maybe a greater systemic problem at play that is like causing murder, but that it's almost like, you got to go out and like have a tough
it's a chaotic thing that's just happening and it's unexplainable. And I totally agree. Like the actual case this movie is making is extremely questionable. I want to be upfront about that. And it's in part not just because of the fact that it is deriving, I think similarly to Faces of Death, a little bit of a sick thrill out of itself that's like not dissimilar from like a thoughtlessly made like piece of true crime, or like, as Jamie, you were alluding to, like conservative fear mongering, like news reports or something. But also, as Daniel, you were just saying there, like it's also how it flattens the documented real life violence into essentially what is like a form of chaos or insanity that has like ruined this otherwise like innocent country or perfect country, and it makes no distinction between personal violence or random violence committed by like serial rapist murderers with like political violence, like war crimes, or like people defending themselves from an oppressive state, or police violence, or all these. And it basically just goes, it's all one giant melting pot of just supreme ugliness, and we need to do something about it. And the only political solution it at all, I don't know if it fully commits to making, but it at least implies, is that, yeah, we should just throw more people in jail forever.
Yeah, it talks,
maybe it'll go away.
It does seem to have an emphasis on like gun laws, but it doesn't get into any specifics.
Gun control as well.
It doesn't get into any specifics, though. It mostly just says this overall kind of sentiment of like, we should have more gun laws, more gun control. And then what's interesting about the film too is that it will show scenes of the cops being completely violent and corrupt, like beating protesters and even setting up that this was a terrible thing, watching, having students laid dead on their campus and things like that. But then the only time that it brings up like what we can do, like you said, it's like it only mentions how hard the cops have it. So it feels strangely like confused at times with really what it wants to say overall. Beyond like the general statement of there's clearly more violence and death happening through murder and everything in America than other countries, especially. I think they compare at the time anyway, the European country, like 3 countries like Germany and 2 others, and all of their murders combined aren't even close to what America's are in that year, something along those lines. So it's constantly hammering home that point, but you're right that it only ever brings up like a cop solution for the most part. It's strange that way, and even that feels empty in a sense.
I don't think it doesn't really. I don't think it goes so far as to present police as a solution. I think because there's they outline this, albeit not in like a way I would super agree with from a contemporary standpoint, but one of the like spooks of the movie is like Sirhan's going to be out in 5 years or whatever. Like these we arrest them and then they're still out running in the streets.
The revolving door prison, I think they mentioned.
It's because I think that's the thing is like we have to remember that this movie came out far before prison reform and some of the kind of like super industrialization of the prison system was actually enacted. And you have to kind of wonder if like it was movies like this that actually contributed to that, but I think that to me, what I do find fairly compelling about the film is like almost all of the imagery is kind of focused in and around this like very classic Americana, suburbia, small town USA. I do think like it is effectively deconstructing this idea of like America as a safe place, or post-war America as like this kind of like haven, even in the places out of the big bad city, you're having like it's worth noting that like most of the shooters and violent men that the movie is looking at are white men. And, it counterbalances that with a few cases of black men, but it actually focuses mostly on like these black men being exterminated by the police nearly immediately, kind of regardless of what's happening, while like these white guys are like perpetually escaping, or like perpetually being like arrested and kind of paraded about and like given a trial. And like, I do think that there are some like, I think it does have some very shrewd ways at just kind of like evoking senses of like systemic inequality, even inside of like, I think a premise now that we look at and see is kind of being very problematic. There's interesting ways in which like the systemic things that it's talking about also just still feel very current.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. That was one thing I couldn't believe just how many different issues pop up throughout the documentary that we're heavily talking about today. It's still very much a problem.
I was gonna say, Jamie, I don't think you've seen any, right? But this reminds me, like every time I've thrown this on, which is I guess this is only the second time, both times I was reminded of the feelings I get watching an Adam Curtis documentary, where you're just like, here he is through like a video essay, assembling this history and providing this narrative through the editing for you and through the voiceover and all that. And every time I watch one of his movies, I leave the movie going, the issues are all the same. Since the 1960s, whenever, and I'm like, we're still dealing with this. And I think on that level, this is incredibly effective, as well as when you just consider like as an audio visual essay film, Like, just, you know, of course it's an incredibly morbid one, and I think you could argue similarly to Face of Death, it's at times a contradictory one. But I find this one incredibly like hypnotic while I'm watching it. And I get weirdly kind of like locked into the mindset of this, like, again, like this manifesto on America's like descent into this just like sick and fascist gun culture. And, you know, and of course the movie is sensationalizing and kind of reveling in the gruesome details, but it's doing like it actually does get to that convincingly apocalyptic place it's trying to get to as just like
but
an
I think that's
film.
because it's a movie that has like very high-minded formal ideas, like that it is conceptualized, and, you know, it's given itself formal structures and rules, and like fairly narrow ones at that, to kind of like, you know, as a sandbox to play in. Like, there's virtually no interviews. There's only, they interview the same coroner that's in Faces of Death, which is a very like, they feel like they're like literally in the same like universe, because they interview the same like Japanese coroner, who's like the coroner of LA, who also is like, you know, seems to have been something of a celebrity figure in his own right.
He loves to like come on in. Do you want to see a guy who's got a knife in his head? Like,
but I also
come
think
film
it's
it.
like at this time that like, if it bleeds, it leads started becoming a big thing. He was the like LA coroner that would go on TV and like make a media appearance when like a celebrity died in Los Angeles. Like, if you look him up, I was doing this before we sat down. Like, I gotta pull up his name. But he had Thomas Noguchi, popularly known as Coroner of the Stars. He performed autopsies on many celebrities, including Belushi.
These are his 2 credits on Letterboxd, by the way. These 2 movies.
Janis Joplin, Robert F. Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe, Sharon Tate, Natalie Wood. Like,
oh my God.
It's
celebrity autopsy guy.
Exactly. So
What
it's
a
like
wild
all
job.
these kind of like mythical Hollywood celebrity autopsies that we kind of like think about. No, like, there was a guy making TV media appearances about that, and like, he's in both of these movies, and I think that's really weird and interesting, because it's the only time that also Killing of America breaks from its formal conceit of essentially like entirely first person on the ground experience and narrative. Like, there's very little B-roll in this movie. You know, everything that you feel, even when it's being somewhat expressionistic in the cutting, it's very rooted to like primary source material. Even if it's like a picture of Ted Bundy's eyes that it like keeps cutting back to in like, you know, menacing ways. It's the actual material is kind of first person documentary. And so I think it's very interesting that even this like coroner, who's kind of your celebrity, special like expert, feels like a primary source himself, because he was going on TV.
Yeah, and there's some there's also some like curious stylization within the film eventually, where it feels like they're purposely trying to incorporate more of an ominous feeling than even the subject matter itself gives you initially. Like you were mentioning the Ted Bundy thing, they kind of do that eye cut out and zoom in, and then they even mention like his face changing and showing all these different versions of his face to create this almost like
it's so
demonic
powerful
thing or something.
And
And
it's
then
super true.
yeah, and he was I believe one of the serial killers that's kind of known for using the media at the time. Someone that kind of understood.
I mean, all the footage they have of him just like mugging to the camera and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And also you were mentioning that there's not a lot of actual interviews, which I did find fascinating, because the only time they really use one is, I think the
it's like the longest interview is with Ed Kemper.
yeah, Ed Kemper, and then Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s killer, I think, for like just a couple snippets of it.
Yeah, but both of these, I don't think either of them were original. Were they original interviews for this? Did they interview Kemper?
I don't.
I think it's still primary source. Like, this is the point that I'm trying to make, is that I think almost all the like killer footage that they used was stuff that had like already aired on TV. So
some of it I think was exclusive. I don't know where they got some of it, but I think the Ed Kemper one is like extended, but I'm pretty sure that's part of like when, you know, the stuff you see at the Fincher show Mindhunter, when the FBI guys were like going in and interviewing all these guys, that footage of Kemper was shot during that process, I'm pretty sure. And I think part of the film, or the mondo aspect of the film, was they were like, come see like more like uncut, like like Ed Kemper. Like, it's kind of fucked up.
And there's the other kind of ominous thing that I feel is incorporated into it is when they have actual quotes from some of these killers that, you know, they present to you, like the beauty salon killer that just goes in and like shoots everybody for no reason. And he says like he doesn't have enough bullets and he wanted to make a name for himself, but it's not him saying it. It's the actual narrator. And the same thing happens with the girl that does the school shooting for the kids and the janitor. And
yes,
again, it just has this more
the Mondays are so boring quote. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Mondays are so boring, and it just has this more ominous feeling of being like disconnected and having the big deep voice narrator be like, "Wasn't this scary?" What I mean,
Chuck Riley is awesome. Like, I actually think his voiceover is a huge reason that the film has the kind of fluidity. Because I would argue, because I think that there's a world where you could say, yeah, this is like obviously more coherently cut together and more crafted and all that kind of stuff, but it also has like a bit of a loose structure where it's like, now we're talking about the serial killers, and now we're talking about assassinations, and now we're talking about war crimes, and it kind of has a similar, but the music, the editing, and the voiceover is a huge reason that I found this a lot less, or if I did find it exhausting, it felt deliberately exhausting.
Yeah, it's just like
and
makes you sad.
It didn't feel like shoddy. It felt like it was part of the actual process being made. And I think that there are moments, like there's like some haunting poetry to some of the lines read by the narrator. One of the ones I wrote down was bodies and more bodies all day, every day, guns and more guns, is just like, and he says it just so flatly. Over like images of kids at the ranges, and like then just like images of the Western cowboy park for families, and then followed by images of like the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan slowed down and analyzed, where they're like, not even the president is safe, you know, like moments like this.
I think it's very funny, bizarre. If you guys Google Chuck Riley, his IMDb profile picture.
Oh, I gotta look this up.
Maybe I'll just let you discover it.
Oh my God.
Wait.
Ed Kemper. What?
That's so funny.
Because he's the trailer of
he's the trailer
of America. Oh my God.
Because he's the voice of Killing of America. His image is that of Ed Kemper. Like, that's so...
That's so good.
Bananas.
Yeah, I think he just does such an amazing job connecting these sections of the movie for you. And it helps too that the movie, I think, as even just cut itself, it's divided into sections that I do think really, really work for you. I actually think that the sort of like 1950s American Dream section, where it goes through like the Elvis and the James Dean and the cars, and is trying to give you, as Daniel, I think you were highlighting, like that iconography of like the dream of America, this safety, this suburb, this something that's being ruined by all of this violence. And then immediately transitioning into the Zapruder film stuff and showing you, slowed down, repeated, the on-tape graphic murder of JFK, which is footage, you've seen plenty of times, but the way that it's assembled
hits harder in this movie. There's something about the final shot from the second angle, where you see his head get blown off in this one, that it's actually much more... It's like you actually get a sense of how bad that last shot was. Like this, like kill shot that gets him. Like, I feel it in this more than anything.
And they put the multi-shooter theory in there as well. So I was sitting there watching. I was going, Oliver Stone, man, this is there is part of that hysteria to it.
Watching this, I'm like, there's the way they actually reconstruct the shooting in this. You're like, there's no way there wasn't two. It's not possible. It's not. And it's weird because like they actually do a better job of it in Killing of America. I think like the kind of continuity cutting around the shooting is actually like insanely effective. And I think it's, which I find very interesting. I think it's also important in kind of like the legacy of these kinds of images to like remember that Killing of America comes out 5 years before Blue Velvet. And I think Blue Velvet is like, that's very much the movie that I think like codifies and like, iconifies exactly what the American white picket fence suburbs with violence lurking inside of it actually looks like. Like, totally. I think that like we have to remember that like in 86, that movie was like a revelation and like the most controversial, like it really upset people. It was something they hadn't confronted. And I think it's important to put Killing of America like in that perspective, because it makes the movie, I think, seem a bit more radical and a bit more dangerous, because these ideas were, I think, far less commonplace. Like, one of the few movies that I think really gets it is like Targets, which is obviously like another big influence on Faces of Death. Like Targets is, have you covered Targets on the show?
Yeah.
We have covered Targets. We loved it.
I mean, I think that's one of the best movies of the 1960s, like hands down. And it's interesting because I think it weirdly, for me, belongs in like a triangle with these two films, because I think that it's also a movie. It's talking about the same thing, this kind of like violence in America, but it comes from such a bizarre place. This like Corman movie that didn't work, and these days he has with Boris Karloff, and then Bogdanovich ends up kind of looking at that and being like, what does this mean? And comes up with this idea of somebody sniping people. Like it feels like quite a savage,
it's so
indictment.
Radical and such a cool idea to be like, you know, a symbol of like an older Hollywood, where what scared people and a public was like a guy in makeup in like a spooky gothic castle, and then just watching that actor have to like mournfully look at like what scares people now, and it's like a mass shooter at like a movie theater. Like that's such like it's really playful and but really like cutting and accurate.
I think Targets is a perfect example too, because it's I think the section of this film that particularly bothers me, even though it's kind of mixed throughout, but it feels like they really start to hone in on it in the last half of the film, which is the random killings, the newfound kind of killing that isn't for money or politics or war or anything. It's just, you're just getting killed. Like some stranger who you don't know just has that bloodlust or whatever it is. And they start to show you scenes of like that convenience store murder is like gut wrenching. Just takes out a gun, shoots the guy. You hear him like say, "Be brave," and
it doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't make any sense, and he calmly walks away. It's just so inhuman.
And the one guy telling the other guy to do it too. Yeah. That's fucked up.
And so it feels like, you know, like you said, it's just wrestling with this kind of, whether it be or not, a newfound kind of bloodlust or killing that only this culture would create, or at least it makes you believe that.
Because it kind of alternates between like the senseless ones like that, and then the ones that are bizarre, but there is a little bit of a purpose to it. Like I think about that section on the one that Gus Van Sant just turned into a movie recently, The Dead Man's Wire, where the guy takes the shotgun and he puts the wire around the guy's neck.
This is less funny in this context, I'll say that.
Yeah, it's more enjoyable as a fictional film, even though Gus Van Sant is like playing with like the mixed media formatting and like doing stuff that makes it look like it's you know, shot as some of the broadcast footage and whatnot. But like, watching it here and having this guy, just the raw footage of the guy screaming with the shotgun on the back of his head and basically being like, this is my mortgage broker who like screwed me. And it's like one of the few moments where it's just like, here's a really stressed out American over money who's like, this is why I'm doing this. And then mixing in the celebrity culture aspect of it, where he wants to get in front of the camera and he wants to give his speech. He wants to hear, you know, his reasoning heard by the rest of the country as well. And that's the section for me too. I agree, Jamie. Like when it gets into that stuff and the serial killers and like that's where it really starts to sort of cohere for me, after doing, you know, spending the early section on the very basic symbol, I think, of like America losing its innocence over these series of political assassinations, which I think you see in like a lot of films made about the subject of the 1960s or the 1970s. Like some of the footage is really I think well put together, but there's part of me that gets a little bit like, oh, we got Buffalo Springfield over people, you know, watering down Vietnam protesters. I'm like, I've seen this a lot. You know, so many people have used this language to depict this exact thing before. It's less radical than some of the other things we see later on. Something
I found interesting too is a lot of them mention, like, especially with these random, really brutal, violent killings that seem like they come out of nowhere. They mention a lot of ex-Marines, but they don't mention PTSD at all. And I don't know about these individual cases. Maybe they looked at them and it wasn't a case of PTSD, but it feels like now if this film was made in some way, they would have mentioned some type of like
less of a topic just on people's minds, I think, honestly.
For sure.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't, I don't think, something they talked about as much in that time period. But I did find that fascinating because now it definitely would have been. Another thing I find interesting in the direction, and we kind of mentioned it a bit, but the number of times you mentioned it with the Ronald Reagan assassination or attempt, but the number of times they actually do the freeze frame and then like the slow motion play by play.
They put a little circle around it, like there's a gun.
There's the gun.
Look at the gun.
It's so, and they do it like 4 times, and so it's definitely a purposeful thing to try to get you almost into the mindset of being in that environment and how like chaotic it is and how fast it all happens. And
I also think that we have to
terrifying.
remember, just like, making something like this in like 1981, like it's also like all of that stuff, like the post-production on that was not easy. Like you had to have people in a lab who were like, scanning stills of the movie and then processing it onto still film and then doing all the kind of like optical printer animation there. Like it's not like the most complicated thing in the world, but it's like, it takes like somebody being like, okay, this is what this is gonna be,
right?
And really, so
if you're making an experimental archival film and assembling that like in the analog era, that is an arduous process. Absolutely, it's not as easy as I'm gonna go get this clip off YouTube and throw it into my timeline.
Exactly. Like you just want to create a still image, like you have to optically print that, and
yeah,
that's kind of nuts.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wouldn't have thought of that, honestly, because it makes it just
that's
that
why
much more
I think I look
intentional.
at this and I go, this is like, it's an impressive piece of craftsmanship, which is it sounds like a fucked up thing to say about a movie that's showing you all of these images and maybe tastelessly showing you this, but it just objectively is.
That's the thing that's interesting, though, is that the fact that there's better craftsmanship in Killing of America makes it far less cursed. Like you can tell that like, a very adept and like thoughtful group of people put this together, and then you watch Faces of Death and it doesn't feel like a thoughtful or adept group of people put it together, and then you're like, so who did? Like a crazy person, like
who wants to look at all of these images all day every day and like really
the editor on these things, oh my god.
Like I can just imagine like the kind of like cackling ghoul who's like putting Faces of Death together outside of like the studious, like artisan crafting Killing of America. It's very interesting. And it's something that I talk about a bit in terms of our movie too, which is like, I worked as a summer as a content moderator, and you see these fucked up shit, like accidents and dead bodies, and it was a very unofficial job, so it was not like a 9-to-5 corporate thing. Like people I know have that, and that's much harder than what I was doing. Because it was a small startup, small social media startup that I was just helping out with. But ultimately, like, the thing that I find most disturbing about it is that I was working there in like 2013, and like, okay, you have a small social media startup and it goes on the App Store, and everyone knows there's not like a robust moderation division or like a pipeline to law enforcement. So like, they'll just start posting child porn and violent, death, gore footage, like real shit, beheadings, ISIS beheadings, they're that ISIS beheading everybody, that was going around for a long time. So, and then I would just kind of sit on the feed and watch everything coming into the app and just like try to take down the like really, 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 really awful shit before they could actually build a moderation department. And the thing in that situation is, yes, absolutely, the videos themselves like are very upsetting, but I felt that I got used to them relatively quickly. But what you kind of can continue to come back to that's so chilling is like, who's posting them, right? And nowadays you ask that question a little less because the robot is posting them. Like the algorithm is essentially regurgitating them because it knows how effective they are. But back in the day, you're like, who has this video clip and is thoughtful enough about uploading this kind of stuff to the internet that they're looking for new social media apps to go up on the App Store that like aren't going to have moderation to post stuff. Like this is a very thoughtful person about this. And this is deeply compulsive. And I found that the most disturbing thing.
Yeah, I would like to ask that person why, for sure. Yeah. Just it would be compelling because it doesn't seem like there's real, like, so I don't think there'd be much monetization behind it because you can't actually monetize it. So it feels almost like they're just putting, poison into the world. They're
just putting evil into the world. Absolutely. Yeah, maybe we can accuse Sheldon of doing something, maybe doing it so with a message or with an agenda,
Absolutely.
with a point to make, but yeah, still doing that nonetheless in the way that he's putting all of this stuff together. Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought I wouldn't last a day in that job. As much as I do this show, I think there's part of me that goes, and maybe I've seen that, something like, there's people who would be like, I would never watch Killing of America. So maybe I'm a little bit beyond some other people in that regard. But, there's definitely moments in this one where the impact of it being real really does viscerally affect me. And I don't know if there's any particular stretch for you guys, but for me in this one, it's the Jim Jones stuff. It's the Jonestown imagery. And I don't know if it's just because I didn't see it as much. I was less familiar with it the first time I watched this, and seeing the like cult organized, like the image especially of just all of the mass suicide of the bodies that they find of all the followers that are there, and especially some of like the African followers who he got involved with too, right? And I don't know, the little bit of like showing you footage of him and then showing the aftermath of that footage, like that was one of the more upsetting ones for me in this film.
Absolutely. And there is like a clip of a woman, one of the followers, saying like how he has alleviated her pain and all of that, and then it's like cut to the mass grave or that site that happens, and it is devastating. I think for me, for some reason, it's always the more the one-on-ones. Like, again, I think I just go back to that convenience store part. That thing has stuck with me because it's just so cold, and there's not even like with Jim Jones, it's pure evil, of course, but you see him and there's this giant ego behind it, and he's gaining power, and like there's this disgusting reason for him doing it, that there's something about it. You can kind of put him in this certain villain category, where as the convenience store killer, it just feels like here's a guy that comes in, takes out a gun, shoots a stranger. He doesn't even take the money, and then he just walks away. And there's something about that feels so terrifying, honestly. Not that I mean, I'm not trying to discount the Jim Jones thing whatsoever, obviously, but it's I guess it's just that
I totally get it. For some reason,
feeling,
for me, just someone because I totally agree about that specific scenario. Someone shooting someone didn't affect me just quite as much as the scale. The scale of the Jim Jones thing was just something that totally kind of floored me, and I feel similarly
when you get
about
to that like 900 person number. I think there's something about the way that hits. I think it's also
it feels
just so
surreal
interesting because both these ones have like there's this kind of shooting at the like suburban neighborhood with kind of the cops going in against a gunman, and it's very interesting because there's one in Faces too, and the one here looks so much more real feels so much more real, and the way the death is rendered, and like there's this like guy like gasping for air at one point, and it's very interesting to kind of look at them back to back, because I find the one Killing of America like genuinely upsetting, and the one in Faces is like obviously fake, but the images look almost identical.
Yeah.
And I find that to be really interesting, that like you can kind of like you can almost side by side compare this kind of the authentic versus the not authentic, and the differences are super subtle, and yet we're very perceptive of them. And I feel like this is what will ultimately continue to happen in the age of AI is, I think there will always be this kind of like perceptibility that we have, whether we want to admit it or not.
Yeah, that's a good subject to bring up too, just in the modern era, because of, this film is very much like, and Faces of Death is one that you could also just use as, like just a pure visceral experience to show people because you're fucked up or whatever. But with the AI thing, it's becoming this whole like we've been talking a lot about what's fake and what's real, and specifically Faces of Death, because we know everything in Killing of America is real. But it's becoming so much more difficult to distinguish, and now it's kind of like the propaganda that comes from something like Faces of Death or even Killing of America, it feels like it's going to be tenfold now, because people are just going to believe in things not only are just one-offs that you shouldn't actually be that fearful of. They're very like, it's the likelihood of it happening isn't
It's not just manipulatively assembled
anymore.
It's just fabricated, just straight up.
And that's terrifying thought too. So it's an interesting thought to bring up in this context.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm most concerned about when it comes to like AI is not even just it's what people think is real. What people think is not real that is. It's this counterfactual, totally. You know what I mean? It's that, yes, we're falling for stuff that's not real, but like by and large, we still can figure that out pretty quickly. There's enough evidence out there, and let's see how disruptive that gets, but I'm a little less concerned about that.
I don't know, man. I saw the video that went viral of the marmots apparently has AI, and I was like, we cannot be fabricating cute animal videos. There's got to be enough cute animals.
Ship has sailed. I get all these weird cute baby videos, but I think to me the thing that's scarier is that something real things happen, and that gets circulated, and people who just want to believe that it's not real now, there's no ability really to prove the veracity of an image, right? Like, let's see if like the non-veracity of images, like how much of a problem that becomes. But yeah.
It's definitely a bigger problem that people are going to look at images of a genocide and go, well, that's just made up propaganda.
When I'm doing the doom scrolling, and every once in a while some war footage pops up on a legitimate news source, and I'll go to the comments, and it'll be like a missile hitting a civilian apartment or something, and I'll go to the comments, and I would say like 75% of them are it's AI, and you're like, this is real. We need to believe in these things. It gets to a scary point. And it's interesting, I guess, just in this context, because the film opens up with like everything you're about to see is real. And I mean, just watching it.
So Jamie, you are prescribing everyone in America, students in America, to sit down and listen and watch Killing of America, to put themselves back
anymore.
in the vibe of this stuff is real. This stuff can happen. A guy can go into the Texas Tower and just decide to mass shoot a bunch of people. That's actually, people would believe that if that happened actually every day, all the time.
Fear everything. That's right.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. One of the other ones I wanted to hit just quickly before we wrap up too, because I forgot, because I was going through my notes here and I was like, we have some heavy hitters that I'm sure people are familiar with. We got Son of Sam in here. We got John Wayne Gacy. I was thinking of that Charlie Rose interview with Paul Thomas Anderson. We got all these characters.
There's such a great there's such a great bit from the John Wayne Gacy thing where he goes, he killed 33 teenage boys and buried them under his deck. The only problem is that he ran out of room, and number 34 he dumped in the river. It's such a crazy line writing, but it's so good, that's like ultimate. That's what makes it sleazy. Like, I think that's ultimately, like, it's ultimately, that's a sleazy thing to say. Like, my God, like, have some self-respect.
I feel the same way about the one that you alluded to, Jamie, that it ends on, where they give you, because they were forced to, it sounds like, which I don't know why, because you would think, I wasn't sure where this note came from. You produced it. I don't know who gave them this note, but apparently they wanted to end them on like less of a, maybe they didn't think it was going to be as effective as a bummer as it was. It was going to be a little bit more fun, like Faces of Death, or at least a little bit more fake feeling, not as like much of just like a real depressing experience. So they have him end on the murder of John Lennon, which is, a pretty corny place to end for a movie like this. It's like literally the vigils, and they're playing Imagine. It's all this stuff. And I could see someone being like, oh, that undermines so much of what this is doing. I think the filmmaker would actually agree with you, which is why the narration at the very end of this entire sequence, where you feel like it's gone like peacenik mode, is 2 people were shot at this Central Park vigil. 5 more were killed while you watched this movie. 1 was the random killing of a stranger. And you're like, Jesus.
I know, it feels so strange, because it feels like it's trying to do the Faces of Death ending, where you're like, here's a little bit of levity, there's a mother and the circle of life and everything like that, and then this one just the takes Japanese, it completely out.
Well, no, what happened is the Japanese distributor forced them to add the visual narrative, and I think that was forced on them to kind of like have some levity at the end. And I think this is the kind of thing that I think you used to be able to get away with when it wasn't so easy to pass edits of things back and forth, right? Because now it's like there's like an old anecdote I remember of Mel Brooks going in for the studio screening after Blazing Saddles and just getting like shellacked with notes, and like he's writing each one down. He's like, I love it. He's like, I love it. That's great. Like the worst notes. Like, cut the farting scene. He's like, yes, we'll do that. And he's like so enthusiastic, and everybody walks out of the meeting being so excited. And then he takes the little notepad he was writing the notes on and he throws in the garbage. And his assistant's like, Mel, what are you going to do? Like, those are all the amazing notes we got that you loved. And he goes, and his assistant's like, you're not going to remember what you wrote down. And Mel Brooks goes, yeah, neither are they. And I think that's the thing, is you used to be able to just like rely on the kind of poor memory of the institutions that you were working on with, but
or just being clever. I was thinking about the end of Detour as well, where they made them shoot like an ending where the bad guy gets his comeuppance, and they frame it in post production as like a weird death dream that he experiences, so it doesn't actually feel like a cop out, right?
And I think that's the thing, is it's like there's something about this ending where you can feel the movie kind of bursting at its own, commercial kind of limitations. And I think for me, like with the movie I just made, like it's interesting to also really look at it or think about it in terms of the legacy of these movies, and like with this conversation, because I think that there's something about making a movie like this where like it is something that has always doubled back on its own kind of commercial circumstances. Like the movies so inherently reflect kind of like, because like capitalizing on real death in like a commercial context is like inherently like,
someone had to give them money to make it so they could sell it to someone else, right?
It's so fraught, and I find it very interesting. That in a lot of the reactions to Faces of Death, there's a lot of negative reviews where people like really hate. They're like, I loved the first half of the movie, but I hated when it became a slasher. It felt so exploitative. And there's a part of me that's like, bro, like the real death's in the first half, not in the second. Like when it becomes a slasher, it's like let's pretend. That's all the pretend stuff. Like and there's this morality that's like being exercised on the movie for being a slasher flick, and like that's what's making it vile. And I find that to be, it's like I've never had a movie that's engendered like such passionate like negative response from people, and it's very interesting to see the way that people will like explain the movie back to me and be like, it's a movie that ultimately becomes like an exploitation film of its own, the very kind that it's critiquing, as if this is like, and I'm like, yes, like have you heard of satire? Like like and I think that there's ways with all, like,
if anything, you're living up to the Mondo filmmaking philosophy, but it's a question of being exactly what you're critiquing.
What's a Mondo film in 2026? What is like a mindless exploitation movie is actually the Hollywood IP cash grab. Like that is the exploitation movie of our day. And I think that that's what I was trying to do with what we did, is kind of take everything about the way these movies were reflecting on their time and try to have something that reflected about the way that we're all being kind of exploited by, these like soulless death cult corporations.
Yeah, no, it's all in there. I would highly recommend, if people haven't seen Faces of Death yet, that they absolutely go and
I also
check
really
it out. We had a
enjoyed
really good time with it.
The killer's kind of his issue with trying to make things as like realistic as possible and people actually believing in what he's doing, kind of a direct connection to what we've been talking about with whether things are fake or real or whatever. And the frustration that he gets when you got the trolls going, it's fake. I really found that wonderful.
Yeah, if you're a fan of this show, you will absolutely enjoy. And I loved going through, Daniel, your list of the movies, because this was obviously on there. Killing of America, Faces of Death, obviously for very, very incredibly obvious
Peeping
reasons.
Tom
But
on there by any chance?
I was going through your list. I was like,
Peeping
Tom, Manhunter,
Henry
Jack built.
Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. That one was critical.
I loved that special effects was on there, the Larry Cohen film.
So pro tip, but Larry Cohen was Issa's godfather, actually.
Whoa.
And I never got to meet him, unfortunately, but she literally grew up reading Larry Cohen's screenplays. Like that's how she learned to write screenplays. So
that's so sick.
Yeah. Like
very cool.
Pour one out for like The Realist.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Cam was one of the last movies he saw. He was very happy.
Oh,
yeah,
that's amazing. That's incredible.
He liked it. So
awesome.
Yeah,
big fans of Cohen over here.
Same. Yeah, well, before we take up too much of your time here, I know you're at the very end of your press tour. You've had a very long press tour. We thank you so much for making the time for us. We are going to wrap here with the reductive rating round, I think, for Killing of America, where we'll very quickly go through this because I think we've said a lot of it already. But this gets to 4 territory for me. I actually, weirdly, in a really fucked up way, get a lot out of this film. And I do think, again, that there is something very incredibly morbidly contradictory about it, but again, in a way that I find incredibly effective and hypnotic. And we went through, obviously, that some of the case politically that it's making at times can be questionable, whether maybe even at the time, but also especially watching it with modern eyes when you watch it, and there's some of the things it doesn't address. But in terms of just like nailing the craftsmanship of a movie like this, the amount of arduous work that went into that we were talking about, that Sheldon was doing, that the editors were doing, that the composers, that the voiceover artists were doing, that everyone was putting into here, it does feel like every tool available to these people as being aware of the American underground and the experimental, sifting through really graphic archival footage and just assembling this harrowing, delirious barrage of pain and suffering. It is often incredibly impressively done, and done with a thoughtfulness about the film form. And the dark narration really is at times, even when it's saying something that feels misleading or incorrect or completely sleazy and disgusting, there's a poetry and a power to it at times. And you can tell that Paul Schrader's brother Leonard was writing some of these lines with how crazy they get. And I don't know, I really do think that viewed purely from like a respectable distance, you watch this film today and you will find something hysterical and poisonous and something that is very violence obsessed, but it's a time capsule, and I find it genuinely quite fascinating and haunting. And the last thing in my notes I didn't get to hit, because we didn't hit some of the major ones there, but one of the ones I wanted to highlight for me personally was one that I wasn't aware of outside of this, because there's many of the serial killer stuff and some of the televised moments that you'll be familiar with, like you'll get to the sort of Wayne Henley stuff, you'll get to the Ted Bundy, the Ed Kemper interview, which goes on for fucking ever, and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I have to listen to this guy talk about the severed heads. There's a lot of detail in that one for sure, and I'm sure there's stuff that if you've seen enough true crime, you've experienced a lot of that. One I don't know that I've ever seen in any other one of these true crime docs, the James Hoskins interview. The one where he's holding the broadcast television station hostage with a gun.
Oh my god!
And he's basically being like, like we don't have a democracy. Ugh. He's in his red plaid and his like, his bucket hat.
Harrowing.
And he seems so nice. And the people talking to him are being like, "You seem like such a nice gentleman. Like, why you don't need to do this?" And when he stops and goes, "I blew my girlfriend away tonight."
Yeah, he's like, I have no other options.
And he's like, that's it for me. And I just that moment, capturing it on tape, and the fact that he then tells them to turn it off at a certain point when they're clearly going to talk further. There's just something so weirdly, disturbingly human in that moment. That is something that you don't often see in, you see him wrestling that I think you wouldn't see in a film that was less thoughtful.
Yeah.
Even if there's moments that I question, that's a moment that really stands out. So yeah, 4 for me.
Yeah, it's a 4 for me too. I mean, it's a hell of a watch. It can be very difficult.
Would recommend it to everyone.
And it feels, confused politically sometimes, but America's confused, Also, it could be like the dated, this was made in 1981, so certain things just maybe weren't talked about in the same way. And because it does feel, when I say confused, it feels like it's kind of got a mixed bag of which side of politics it's really on and what the solutions are to these problems.
Yeah, when I say confused, I think it's like it connects this barrage of death and then goes, look at these LA punks and prostitutes and like the S&M cruising scene. And I'm like, I don't necessarily know. Okay, all right.
yeah, absolutely. But I mean,
I think people can have fun at night and it not be them being serial killers. But
death, but amazing direction and editing. I mean, this thing just moves and it really does feel like a very visceral experience the entire time. It's compelling. It does still feel filthy. It has this feeling similar to like Faces of Death, where it feels almost like you shouldn't be watching it, or you shouldn't have access to this kind of footage or something like that. But
you're watching the Ring tape.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it feels cursed a little bit. But the narration from Chuck Riley is really incredible and does create this even more ominous tone to it that, you know, the footage already brings, but he just brings an extra layer. So yeah, it works well for what it's trying to do. 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm actually with you guys 100%. Like, I think
let's go.
I think it's a 4-bagger. That's what I would have gone with. So I'm glad to see that we all have flawless taste.
Absolutely. I got to check out more Sheldon Rennan, apparently, if he has any other movies.
I was going to say, I don't know if you have another one in this when you put something like this out into the world.
That's true. Yeah, they're like, we're not giving this guy money again. This was crazy.
Fair enough. Yeah, it didn't get even a release in North America until 2013, I think. So, you know.
Holy shit. I didn't know it was that late. Wow.
I think it's also Mitch at Fantasia who told me about this to begin with. It was either Mitch or maybe Kaplowski. But yeah. Have you guys had Peter Kaplowski on?
Yeah, he's our boy. He's been on. Yeah.
I got to go find that episode. That I love him so much.
What was it? Do you remember what his was, Jamie?
I actually don't. But
Mute Witness. Mute Witness.
Yeah. He's one of those guys that when he comes on, I just like shut up and listen just because he's so good at what he does.
Yeah. Shout out to Peter. Can't wait for Midnight Madness. And thanks so much again to you, Daniel. That's going to wrap it up for this week. That was once again Face of Death from 1978, Killing of America from 1981. We're very happy to have finally had you and
hope to be back.
So many nuggets of your process. We are so stoked to know that there's someone out there writing and making genre movies that are maybe hitting for a pop audience that has seen Killing of America and has referenced Killing of America or this kind of film. So it feels like one of us is kind of out there into the world. So thank you. Everyone go and check out his film. Is there anything else can people find your other movies, places? Is there
you can find How to Blow Up a Pipeline, I believe, on Hulu or on VOD. You can find Cam on my website because it is currently not legally available to watch anywhere in the world. We're working on rights.
Netflix blew that shit?
No, it was only a 7-year license with Netflix, and there was kind of some rights issues that had to do with one of the financiers behind the movie no longer exists. And so we've been kind of working out the rights problem because usually the rights aren't up like globally for something like after only 7 years. And so I think we just expected it would be easy and then it wasn't. So we're working on re-release plans. I'm hoping to get a 35mm print made soon. And,
Very cool.
But I'm excited to bring Cam back to the world, hopefully in the fall.
Awesome.
Because
we can't recommend though. Everyone go and check out all of Daniel's movies. How to Blow Up Pipeline sounds readily available. Please go and check it out. For our listeners, we're going to be back actually in 1 week's time where we are going to be over on the Patreon feed. And as Jamie alluded to, we're going Elaine May mode. It's the 50th anniversary of Mikey and Nikki, a film we have yet to cover on the show. And it's one of my favorite movies ever. I'm very excited to talk about it. And we hadn't talked about Elaine May, so we were like, maybe we should put her in a bit of a context for people. So it is also the 55th anniversary of A New Leaf. So we are going to talk about both those films next week over on the Patreon. I know some people have voted for her in the past on the voting poll for what you want to hear us talk about. So we're doing it for you. We're answering it for you. Look forward to that. And then in 1 week's time, actually 2 weeks time, over back on the main feed with a special guest, we're going to be talking about Prince. Because this is the whiplash season of the show. We love going from sleazy underground mondo films to rom-coms about basketball to Purple Rain and Under the Cherry Moon, which we have a guest who is very well versed on both those films who's going to be talking about them with us. I'm very excited to have them back. So look forward to that. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.